Okay, so let's talk about the ecdysozoans, the nematodes, the arthropods, and a few other groups. There are numerous phyla in this ecdysozoan clade, but the nematodes and arthropods are so very large and extremely important ecologically that we're going to kind of focus on them. So, something that all members of this clade have in common is that they secrete a tough exterior layer called a cuticle. And this cuticle can function as protection in supporting them and in muscle attachment. It's also very handy because it helps prevent dehydration for terrestrial organisms. This cuticle is metabolically inert. It doesn't actually grow once it's hardened. So this means as the organism gets larger, this cuticle must be shed and regrown. And this process of shedding is called ecdysis or molting. So one of the consequences of the rigid cuticle is that many ecdysozoans have jointed appendages to help them move around, right? Because this rigid cuticle makes it harder to kind of, in some cases, move, or we often find specialized breathing structures because this cuticle is typically gas-proof. So here is an example of molting. So we have this whip scorpion, and this was the original cuticle, and you can see it's emerging from that original cuticle. And now this, the new cuticle starts to form underneath the old one, but it's, of course, much more soft and flexible. It kind of has to be. And it's going to take a little while for it to reharden. And so during the time when that new cuticle isn't quite hardened, that organism is pretty vulnerable because, again, the cuticle's not super hard. And for an organism like this, the fact that its cuticle is not fully hardened is going to affect its ability to move around with those jointed appendages. So that's kind of a constraint they face. Here we have an example of the way that muscles would be attached to this cuticle, which forms in some organisms what we call the exoskeleton. So I want to talk about three, before I dive into the nematodes and the arthropods, which are our main big groups we're going to talk about. I want to talk about three smaller groups first. The priapulids, the chinorhynchs, and the loriciferans. Also, the horsehair worm. Sorry, missed one. Okay. So, the priapulids have 3 segments and a toothed pharynx that they can evert to capture invertebrate prey. The chinorhynchs are microscopic organisms that have 13 segments covered with little plates. Here's one right here. The loriciferans have 4 segments covered by 6 cuticular plates. They have these anterior spines that we don't necessarily know the function of, and we know that some of them eat bacteria. And then we have the horsehair worms that have these long thread-like bodies. Adults are free-living. The larvae tend to be endoparasites that will live in arthropods. So here we see an adult horsehair worm leaving the body of a wood cricket that it parasitized during its larval development. So it fully grew and now is coming out of that cricket. So I feel a little bad for the cricket. So that's just a smattering of the diversity of some of the small groups. But let's talk about a big group, the nematodes. So when it comes to big, nematodes are, well, no, nematodes themselves are usually pretty little, but the group is big. Oh, this doesn't want to erase. Hold on. Okay, so let's talk phylum Nematoda, also known as the roundworms. These are among the most ubiquitous of all animals. We find them everywhere. aquatic habitats, moist soils, plant tissues, body fluids, and tissues of other animals. They can be free-living, they can be parasitic. They are covered by a tough, multi-layered cuticle that is shed with growth. Respiration is across the cuticle and gut wall. It has no circulatory system. Fluid in the body will conduct nutrients through the pseudocoelom. This is a pseudocoelomate animal. It is sexual. It does have sexual reproduction. The sexes are separate with the male versus the female. The females tend to be much larger. And the zygotes it creates typically are very resistant to environmental conditions and can be dormant if necessary. So let's look at some images here. So here we are looking at juveniles that have encysted into muscle tissue of some other type of animal, probably some kind of larger vertebrate animal. Here is a sort of diagram of our typical nematode. So you can see we've got a mouth, we've got an anus. The body cavity is a pseudocoelom. We have our thick cuticle. We have a gut. In this case, we're looking at a male, so we have the testis. We have our ventral nerve cords coming down. We have our anterior brain. Sorry about that, I had to shut my phone up. Okay. So let's talk about some ecological roles. Some of them are unpleasant. Because this is such a ubiquitous animal, it takes upon a variety of different ecological roles. So they can be decomposers, finding them in the soil or in ocean sediment. But many are parasites. Many are parasites on plants and act as agricultural pests that infect the root systems of crops. Although some are beneficial because they parasitize animals that are detrimental to crops. And about 50 species parasitize humans, such as trichinella, which causes trichinosis. You can get this from eating undercooked pork or wild game, in which the juveniles have encysted into muscle tissue, like you are seeing in this image right here. If this is the muscle tissue of an animal you eat, guess who's coming to visit you? You can end up with this trichinella worm. So what happens is the cysts will develop into a mature adult in the human gut and burrow into other tissues to continue their life cycle. Another really common parasite to humans is the pinworm. So what you're looking at here is your typical pinworm infection. So a human somehow ends up ingesting these eggs, which are teeny tiny. They could be accidentally ingested. The larvae are released into the intestine. The female will lay eggs around the anal region at night. The secretions around the eggs are sticky and tend to cause itching in that area, so that is a symptom of having a pinworm infection. The infection rate for pinworm in young children is actually really high. It's something like 50%. This is considered to be a really, really common thing that people have. Most of them children, because they don't know, but yeah. So if your bum is itchy, you could possibly have a pinworm infection. So that's my little PSA for you. Another really lovely roundworm that one could be infected with is Ascaris. So here is a cross-section. So this organism is one we're going to look at in lab, and that is why I am taking the time to show you this cross-section. So this is a female, and here is her uterus, which is full of eggs because it is gravid, which means full of eggs. So something to notice here is that we have a lot, this is another parasitic roundworm. So we see a lot of the internal organs being specialized for reproduction, right? So we see these are all parts of the ovary. We have the uterus taking up a large amount of space. We also have, we can see the intestine here. Again, this is a cross-section, of course. We can see the longitudinal muscles along here. A little bit hard to see, but here's our ventral nerve cord. Here's our dorsal nerve cord, right? Because we've got those nerve cords running along the organism. Let's see what else. We have an oviduct, so that's another reproductive structure. And as I said, this is a pseudocoelomate animal, so there's that pseudocoelom. So all of these we are going to be looking at in lab, so I would recommend familiarizing yourself with this image and some of these structures so that when you see it on a slide, it's not particularly surprising to you. All right, so the arthropods are probably the only group that can rival the nematodes in terms of their ubiquity. And they are also incredibly diverse, like cray-cray diverse. I think I have to switch pens because this red pen is not erasing very well. So over 1.2 million species described, many more thought to be undiscovered. 2/3 of all known species are arthropods, and they are largely regarded as being the most successful of all the animal phyla. Why? Why are these guys so successful? The arthropod success is largely ascribed to the body plan, which is segmented. Typically with 3 major segments: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Sometimes these first 2 are fused into something called the cephalothorax. So each segment has a specific duty, right? The duty might be sensory, it might be related to digestion, it might be related to reproduction. And this division of labor increased the efficiency of those tasks. Also, we saw appendages associated with each segment. These appendages were jointed, and they came in pairs. Most were specialized either for locomotion, so things like legs, things like the tail. Feeding, so things like these mouthpart appendages. Sensory, so things like the antenna. Reproductive, not shown here, but this organism would have some kind of reproductive structure for, example, transferring sperm, for example, or defense purposes. Some, not here, but some even had appendages specialized for flight. Many of the insects. It's probably a good thing that this lobster can't fly, but we'll draw a wing anyway. I believe believe I can fly. I really can't. Okay. Okay. More arthropod anatomy. The arthropods have an exoskeleton made of chitin. So chitin, that modified carbohydrate that we also saw in fungus. In addition to chitin, the exoskeleton also has layers of protein, so it's very tough and strong. With some it's not super brittle or anything. So this gives really good protection and also a place for muscles to attach. It also allows them to live in terrestrial habitats because it's watertight and prevents desiccation. The downside, it must be shed to grow. And so that's process of molting is one of the things that lets us know as biologists they belong in the Ecdysozoan clade. They have open circulatory systems. So, as I mentioned earlier, this means that the fluid known as hemolymph is going to be propelled through these little short arteries into the surrounding, sort of area here where we have organs to bathe the tissues in fluid. They then can be, brought back up into these sinuses and pumped again by the heart to move them around. They are coeliomates. Many have specialized breathing structures that reflect their ecology. What do I mean by that? I mean that in aquatic arthropods, we'll have gills. In terrestrial arthropods, we'll have a tracheal system or some other kind of lung-type structure that will facilitate breathing in the air. So there are 4 major lineages of arthropods that we're going to talk about. There are what are known as the Caeciliarates. This includes horseshoe crabs, scorpions, ticks, mites, and spiders. The arachnids. I'm sorry, the arachnids are a type of Caeciliarate. I'm ahead of myself. Arachnids will come up while we're talking about the Caeciliarates. The myropods. The crustaceans, and the hexapods. Okay, so this includes centipedes and millipedes. This includes our crabs, lobsters, barnacles, and this, of course, is insects. So a lot of diversity. So here we have a couple of examples. So the Caeciliarates get their name from a claw-like feeding appendage called a caeciliare. And I'm going to permanently erase this. So let's just talk about these. So these are pinchers or fangs that grasp rather than chew their prey. The Caeciliarates have 2 body segments, an anterior cephalothorax, and a posterior abdomen. The largest group is the arachnids. So the arachnids include spiders, ticks, mites, and scorpions. But this group also includes the horseshoe crabs. These are also in this group, and the sea spiders. So the arachnids are known for having, let me get my eraser. Let's talk about the arachnids in a little more detail. The arachnids are known for having 6 pairs of appendages. So these include the chelicerae, so a pair of chelicerae, pedipalps, which are sensory, or they could be used for feeding or reproduction, just depending on the organism, and 4 pairs of walking legs, as most of you know. Most have poison glands associated with their chelicerae. We also see in many arachnids, or at least in spiders, something called a book lung. So a book lung is a plate-like stack of respiratory tissue contained within the exoskeleton. Let me find a picture. Okay, so not the world's greatest picture, but so within the exoskeleton, we have this structure called the book lung, that is this stack of respiratory plates that air will flow through, and this will act as a respiratory organ in the spiders. Okay, let me get that out of the way. We also see in many spiders that they produce silk in their abdominal glands that can be used for webs. They also can be used, for escape. Some will even use it as a form of gift wrap in courtship. So they might take a prey item and wrap it up in silk and give it to their mate as a courtship ritual. They're really very sweet. The myriapods are the millipedes and centipedes. These are all terrestrial. And the way kind of we think about their segmentation, they have a distinct head. And then we usually just say they have a highly segmented abdomen. And these segments are all pretty similar after the head. The head has a pair of antennae and 3 pairs of appendages modified as mouth parts, including mandibles. Millipedes have 2 pairs of legs per segment. So millipedes. And tend to eat decaying plant matter. So here is our millipede. Centipedes have 1 pair of legs per segment and are usually carnivorous and have poison claws on their first body segment to paralyze their prey. Also can be used for defense. Okay, so crustaceans include crabs, lobsters, barnacles, and shrimps. These are almost exclusively marine. Let me get my... Or I should say they're almost exclusively aquatic. They can be either freshwater or marine. Although there are some exceptions, there are some terrestrial ones. They usually have many highly specialized appendages. For example, lobsters and crayfish have 19 pairs of appendages, including antenna, mouth parts, and many appendages for walking and swimming, and things like sperm transfer. The cuticle is hardened, extra hard, into a structure known as a carapace. Hardened into carapace that covers the head and thorax. They are sexual with separate sexes. The female often carries fertilized eggs under her abdominal segments, what we might call the tail if we were at Red Lobster eating it. So let's bounce back just for a second here. Woo, there you are. So she probably, if this was a she, would be carrying her eggs underneath this region. So the carapace would be covering the head and the thorax region. And as you can see, we have lots and lots of appendages coming off for walking, for eating, for swimming, we got some swimming ones back here, for reproduction, etc. So there's actually a fair amount of diversity among the crustaceans. And we're going to look at some of this diversity in lab. There's a group known as the isopods. So these can be freshwater, marine, or terrestrial. So these, and I guarantee you've probably seen these, would include the pill bugs. Those are actually, so here's my little, oh no, I lost my place. You remember these guys? You might remember these from 1406. We did a little experiment on them. Those are actually crustaceans. There are the decapods, most of which are marine. So these include things like lobsters, crayfish, crabs, shrimp, lots of things that taste good with butter. I'm sure there's some that don't. The copepods. So these tend to be members of the plankton and krill communities. In aquatic ecosystems. So here would be an example of a copepod. They're usually quite little. So here's our decapod example. Here's our isopod example. And probably the most unusual of all are the barnacles. So they are sessile, and the cuticle is hardened into a shell. And I think at first glance somebody might think a barnacle might belong in the phylum Mollusca or something, but it's not. It is a crustacean. It feeds by filtering the water that surrounds them, and it's sessile and in this shell, but it is indeed a crustacean. Okay, Hexapoda. Where do you even start? Oh my goodness. There's so many of them. And I know you're probably thinking, there's so many slides. Yes, I know. In fact, let's take a little break. Let's take a break. Take a break. Come back, talk about Hexapoda. Okay, that sounds good to me. Coffee break!